edition, 7:25 GMT edition of the KhoodeelaarTV television channel, broadcasting under the banner of the BabyAngelGeronimo editions. From the UK, this is the 8:25 AM British Standard Time edition, part 1 of the day's broadcast. We shall be talking about the criminality created, tolerated, perpetrated, perpetuated, encouraged, and relied on by most of the so-called comprehensive schools and by their equivalents. During the morning journeys to the schools, most of the boys of these schools happen to travel in groups on public transport. And when they leave the school in the afternoon, mid-afternoon, they do the same. They travel in groups. And what do they do? Anyone who has suffered the experience or has had to suffer the experience of traveling at the same time for their own purposes to their own destinations would know that these groups of mainly so-called comprehensive school children, especially boys, but not exclusively boys, these are teenaged boys. They are, during the duration of the trips, they are a veritable criminal gang, each one of them, each gang, each group, because they create the most antisocial atmosphere on the transport, in the vehicle, and on the road in the minutes or the time that they wait for if it is a bus to arrive. And when they travel in the London system, which is the underground system, they are absolute criminals. Now, imagine how many criminals are out at loose during these hours across London. It's hundreds of thousands, if not more. And looking at the evidence of the kind of proceedings, the contents of the proceedings of the so-called debates about so-called education, there is no education in this country, it's schooling. The so-called Education Act or education bills, there is nothing. There is absolutely no mention of these criminals being allowed to obstruct, harass, taunt, intimidate, inconvenience, and sometimes alarm so many hundreds of thousands of ordinary persons trying to get to their own place of work or get from their own place of residence to wherever they are going. That is number one. Number two is, when the double-decker bus was kind of converted into a closed kind of unit, like a moving prison, by the liar Ken Livingstone, it gave the criminals an extra closed kind of space in which to harass, taunt, intimidate the passengers. And the other thing is that when they got rid of the the actual guard, the bus guard that used to be on the buses, they made sure that ordinary passengers would be tormented and alarmed and frightened and attacked and violated by these gangs of criminals. There are other criminals on the buses behaving in identical criminal way. But those criminals in number are far less, far fewer than the numbers of the criminals that appear to be school children, so-called, wearing school uniforms and having the benefit of the doubt that they are actually somehow under accountability of some sort back at school or something. They are never held to account. There is no sight, there is no sign, there is no symbol of any objectively protective civil policing anywhere on the route. And when the so-called assemblies take place, that is to say the gatherings, where the so-called head teacher gives a banal and stupid sermon, there is no mention of this. So millions of people in London are treated to organized crime created by schools. Now, you know that any crime or criminal event, incident, doesn't take even a few minutes. A serious crime can be committed in a matter of seconds. So there is no discussion about these criminalities in the so-called newspapers, no discussion in the so-called debates on the so-called education in the House of Commons. The House of Peers differs from the House of Commons in that sometimes its members who speak on any issue, sometimes they actually appear to know some of the facts and they appear to have done the fact checking and the research, which makes their contribution worth noting. But that's it. There is no evidence that either the House of Peers, most certainly not the House of Commons, nor the actual schools, they don't give a shit about the criminality, the crimes committed against ordinary members of the public by gangs of school-linked, school-going teen criminals and perverts. Well, the numbers of girls committing crimes as gangsters in those time slots, the numbers are smaller, fewer than the numbers of the boys. But that difference in numbers doesn't diminish in any way the devastating impact that the criminals and crimes done by them have on their victims, the ordinary people, on the buses, on the underground, on the overground, anywhere. So how is that possible? As I said about the policing, the feature run by the Daily Boris Graph during the week last week, saying that how did policing come to this? meaning that policing has finished, ended. There was no policing in this country. Well, this is the evidence. The criminal gangs operated by reference to these gangs being from the schools. And if anyone who knows the secondary head teachers in London, if anyone goes to these schools with any intention to raise the matter with the head teacher, they would be disappointed, to say the least, to put it mildly. Because most of the head teachers in London schools are offenders of the highest degree. Many of them are perverse, and they abuse their posts as head teachers by operating their particular office space or spaces for committing all kinds of crimes, including adultery and sexual kind of pervert sexual activities. Most of the schools are run by criminals sitting or occupying the post of head teachers. And as the evidence, the updated evidence I gathered at the Stratford School from January 1992 to up to about June 1992 is any guide, then the accountability to which the teachers must be held is not only seen as a bad thing by their teachers, but even worse, it is seen as an encroachment of the head teacher's territory by these outsiders. School governors, either as parents or as otherwise appointed legitimately to a given school, they do not constitute in any way breakers of any privilege that should be respected. In fact, the ideal role of the governors, parent governors, otherwise legitimately appointed governors, would be the least of the guarantees that should be there to make sure that a school is administered and operated by mainly the head teacher with the support of almost the nearest necessary number of teachers and support staff. But that doesn't happen because each head teacher is given the unlimited discretion. Unlimited discretion. The head teacher is referred to even by the ordinary public as being entitled to endless discretion and power and so on. Well, head teachers, being ordinary humans, should not enjoy any such esteem. The head teacher should be rigorously audited and held to account, which they are not, but they should be. And back to the assembly, let's say, which might be happening about this time. Let's say, what is the topic of the assembly? Most head teachers behave as prima donnas. corrupt, and with their mind somewhere else, etc., etc., etc. So that is each individual school unit of criminality. Now, if you combined all of these schools in London, for example, or in other cities, and count the number of head teachers that are involved in this, you can count hundreds, if not thousands. And once the kind of routine is done, the assembly is done, or once the governor's meeting routine is done, the head teacher is returned to the same freedom to indulgence in perversion, selfishness, and grotesque behavior as they often indulge in when there is no one around. Now, in the case of one secondary school, let's say, which has got a reputation that is as low, the reputation is too low to be mentioned. But let's say that the reputation. So one head teacher, let's say, one head teacher imagine a head teacher sitting in their little office, the den of operations. They indulge in all kinds of bad behavior. Most of their teachers, in fact, the absolute majority of their teachers of secondary schools in London are ill-read, ill-educated, and ill-mannered. When any parent accidentally appears to arrive at the school, of course, cannot hide the fact that these parents have got absolute priority to just wish their children or child the best. But the head teacher takes offense at the parent or the guardian arriving at the school. So this is an additional crime and criminality. And there is no audit or accountability to which these kind of criminals are held to account, for which these kind of criminals are held to account. I created twice or more than twice with part participation of the given head teacher or whatever, schemes that would radically change the behavior of these school head teachers and would really transform the behavior of the recalcitrant, criminally misbehaving children. To cut it short, I was a governor at 4 schools in Tower Hamlets at once, that is to say simultaneously, not every single day, but I was attending a school related activity every single day of the week. And I found that the more honest my approach, the more criminal the response from the head teacher, and so on. So, where are the parents? The parents cannot. Most guardians cannot be expected to compete with the consolidated piles of power that are available or made available to the head teacher. It is their territory. The school is the head teacher's territory. And anyone going in there is treated, in effect, not necessarily in formal words, but in effect treated as an intruder by the head teacher and their controlling kind of symbol or stooge. There is nothing in the minutes of the school governors' meetings that actually records the actual behavior of the school head teacher. And there is no actual reporting of the behavior of the school registered criminals out on the streets. It is notoriously well-known fact that secondary schools, both involving the symbolic teacher and the hired kind of main kind of stooges, so in the public sphere, in the public domain, there is no space for holding the school teacher, head teacher, to account. And the teachers' union, the staff union, are too obsessed with their own petty little interests to have any time for the serious engagement with concerned parents and guardians and concerned members of the community about the given behavior of the school during the given week or given period. So we shall be talking about the criminal schools in London and by extension the criminal schools in England more in due course. Going back to the behavior of Boris Johnson, the congenital criminal, you can imagine how was it that Boris Johnson dragged for years something that should have been immediately dealt with as soon as it was discovered. That is to say, his affair and abuse of his post as mayor of London, his affair with Jennifer Arcuri. It's been many, many years since this took place or this began. And to many of the people in South London, the behavior of various employees at number 10 Downing Street has been exposed as being the behavior of criminals. Why am I using this term criminal? because that is what they are. That is what has been going on everywhere in the seats of power, let's say. And Fleet Street's stupid and deferential reference to number 10 Downing Street. Fuck off. There is no such place as number 10 Downing Street. What there is Boris Johnson the liar. So Downing Street sources is a corruption in itself. It's Johnson when it refers to him, or LieZ Truss, as it is she now. We went to check the balance of the relevant account in the banking system, so-called, that has been of use by our campaign organization. And we found that the accounts, quite frequently, the bank accounts online are targeted by fraudsters who create bogus kind of agreement for deduction, what is called direct debit. Now, this has been flagged up as a kind of reassuring psychological balance by the financial establishment to hide the corruption and criminality that so the banks are colluding with organized fraudsters who are stealing money from people's accounts without any legally lawful kind of agreement. There hardly ever is any agreement to allow the uses or abuses of the bank accounts for stealing money, millions of pounds. Now, we found out this week, we found out latest occasion was last week, and it continued into the weekend. We found out that there was a fictitious, fraudulent direct debit arrangement made for money to be paid to this fraudulent account from the account that we use. And we didn't recognize. The way we found out was that when the balance was checked, the automated voice of the bank system said two letters or two words. And those were completely news to us, because we never ever came across those two names or words. So we told the bank that the money that was being stolen without our authority or knowledge. And that the kind of theft must be immediately put an end to and stopped. So the bank person dealing with the call said that, but the bank reserves the right to contact the other party to make sure that there was no mistake in the agreement. Well, we knew that there were mistakes because we never had any agreement for any direct debit or any other mode of payments. Eventually, they stopped the process, and we noticed that at least 3 months' payments had been returned to the account. This was the latest experience. But what the actual experience shows is that everywhere there is the need to have constant vigilance. The saying, to paraphrase the saying, the constant vigilance is the price of keeping your money safe in the bank account. How many people are being fleeced and how many people are able to get their money back? The answer is that too many people are being fleeced and too few people are being allowed to get their money back, because the banks erect a barrier to frustrate the owner of the money or the account from getting their money back. So we shall be stopping at this particular point, and we shall come back to further update during the day, rest of the day. This is just over half an hour long, this particular one. So we've talked about mainly criminal gangs on the way to school, so-called, and in the Midlands. And we shall be taking a look at the whole macro economic arrangement about creating jobs, genuine jobs. For example, if every school, say, has in place permanent kind of jobs that are rotated in order to make sure their security is not compromised, and has 5 to 10 full-time equivalent posts to monitor the behavior of these school gangs, this would create 10 solid jobs. And we shall add the curriculum for these particular individuals as to what to study, what to look out for, and how to do their job in monitoring and reporting the behavior of mainly teenage schoolboys and teenage girls on the way to school and on the way from school. These jobs would be directly applied to really kind of effectively provide a policing service. The real policing that is not available but should be available, this will provide the real policing. And every recommendation that we are making will be, of course, put together, collated, edited, and published in a collection. We are saying that the macroeconomic model, if you extrapolate this and apply to every institution, the anti-fraud army should be several million strong in the population. And those would be several million additional permanent jobs for really high standard experienced by ordinary members of the public and others. This is something that is more revolutionary than any revolutionary regime has ever put in place. So this is coming to 0802 hours GMT, that is 0902 hours British Standard Time on Monday, Tuesday, 4th of October 2022. This has been the Khoodeelaar television channel on the internet, broadcast under the banner of the BabyAngelGeronimo. And BabyAngelGeronimo provides the guidance, the overall overarching guidance to what should happen to stop the depravity and criminality at every level, the cruelty at every level, especially also including the vets, the veterinary surgery businesses, as well as the veterinary kind of accountability places. And we hope that every single targeted victim of crime and criminality and defamation and the demonization which have been targeted at BabyAngelGeronimo, every other such targets would be able to fend off and stop and prevent the criminal depravity laden organizational wrongdoers and offenders, as well as their equivalents in non-uniform guises and at locations that are not recorded as their own locations. So we shall put an end to this particular edition, as I say. 0904 hours British Standard Time, 0804 hours Greenwich Mean Time on Tuesday, the 4th of October, 2000.